It's a milestone event that has been thoroughly covered, including on Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries, but some aspects of the Lake Michigan event have not been given proper focus. It's a story of UFOs' extraction operation of the lake's freshwater. Let's explore. Hi everyone, and welcome to Project Bluebook, where we explore all things unidentified. I am Thor, and thanks for tuning in. It happened the evening of March 8, 1994. The first 911 call took place shortly after 9 p.m. when Daryl and Holly Graves called in what they were witnessing in Ottawa County, West Michigan skies, over land and over the lake. At first they saw 3 lights. Then they saw a whole string of them curving at considerable height like a string of Christmas lights. Before the night was out, 911 dispatcher had recorded over 65 calls. Local police, including Jeff Welthouse, police officer in Holland, Michigan, witnessed the craft, as did a meteorologist with the National Weather Service office in Muskegon County by the name of Jack Bushong, who tracked the UFOs on radar and recorded their presence, movement, speed, altitude, and numbers. They reflected stronger signals than airplanes did because, in his words, they weren't planes, they were bigger, adding, these were definitely solid material objects. Planes show a pinpoint on the radarscope. These were the size of half a thumbnail. I've never seen anything like it, not even when tracking severe weather. End quote. Local police and local 911 dispatchers were overwhelmed with calls that night, each caller apologizing for the call, and the dispatchers trying to explain it away as planes, radio tower outages, anything that would eliminate the sightings as unexplained phenomena, UFOs.
We were just wondering, have you heard anything about these lights that are flickering up here in the east-southeast area?
Okay, what do you have there, sir? There were at least 4 lights, and they were all flashing like okay, there was a sequence. It was kind of like a V, and there was 4 lights, and they were blinking back and forth. And there's no way, I mean, a plane's not that wide. And then it went down to 3 lights, and it started spinning around, like it was a circular motion. Then it started going up and down, and then it went to 2 lights. It did the same thing, and now it's 1 and just spinning in a circle.
Eyewitnesses calling in described between 3 and 7 objects, hovering at between 1,000 feet to an estimated 20,000 feet, and many of the reported altitudes have been confirmed by Jack Bushong's weather observation equipment. They were described as either round or cylindrical in shape, emitting red, green, and white lights. Cindy Pravda was on the phone with a friend when she saw a strange light in her backyard. She went outside to look and saw 2 objects hovering at close distance. She stayed on the phone and casually proclaimed to her friend, "I got UFOs in my backyard right now," end quote, adding that she watched them for over half an hour as they moved towards the highway beyond her house, and then came back to the exact same position closer to her backyard. Then they disappeared in the blink of an eye, one after the other. 22 miles further south, the Graves family saw 6 objects up close across the street from their house, over a barn and a farm field. Over the next 3 hours, starting around 9:30 p.m. and lasting past midnight, the objects were seen in over 42 counties in Michigan, including Ottawa, Muskegon, Allegan, and Berrien counties, and witnessed by at least 300 people. The calls became so intense that police officer Jeff Welthouse decided to call the local office of the National Weather Service, knowing they had radar tracking equipment to check what they were seeing. Their phone call was recorded and marks the first time Jack Bushong heard of the sightings. Their conversation lasted almost 20 minutes, and its full-length version is an incredibly rich testament of how the conversation goes, from reaction to curiosity to reason, where the observer looks for rational explanations by all means, and when not available, ultimately resulting in a bewilderment that leads to a submission to this being unexplainable as weather phenomena, a balloon, helicopter, plane, military flares, or anything else natural or man-made. At their highest, meteorologist Jack Bushong recorded the UFOs over Lake Michigan at an altitude of almost 60,000 feet. That's nearing the edge of Earth's atmosphere, the beginning of the stratosphere, the final layer before outer space, and all the way down to 5,000 feet. Eyewitnesses saw the objects much closer, as low as 1,000 feet. The behavior, shape, and capabilities of these solid objects confirm intelligent control without being explainable as known human technology. It paints a skeptic like meteorologist Jack Bushong into a corner as a scientist who professionally should always look for and find a rational explanation. Here, he was forced to admit this was different. Let's listen to excerpts from Weatherman Bushong and Officer Weltow's conversation.
Well, the first Muskegon. Hi, Muskegon. This is Ottawa County 911 calling. Yeah, how you doing? Good. You guys have access to a radar there, don't you? Yes, we do. You do. You getting anything weird down in the southern Ottawa County area? Anything weird? Hold on for a second, okay? I'm looking at it in the vertical now, and I'm not really. Let's see, wait a minute, something right there. Okay, let's see what that is. Looks like that was a larger turn down there. Let's see, that looks like it's up about maybe, well, disappeared, but it was up about 6,000 feet and about, could have been a plane. I mean, it was pretty big. Wait a minute. So that was getting a bunch of weird ones down there. And like I see, now it's starting to, appears to be moving a little bit south. Yeah, okay, on blue. Let's see. Yeah, there's something big down there. Wait a minute, that's really strange. Oh my God, what is that?
Bushong contacted Muskegon County Airport's FAA control tower to see if they had observed anything, and according to Bushong, the ATC on call that night confirmed he too was tracking the objects on radar. Bushong soon after stopped talking about the event. He refused to talk to the press about his findings, and his superiors advised him not to share any of the information or the recordings. When MUFON research investigator Virginia Tilley contacted the National Weather Service office asking to speak to Jack Bushong, she was told he was not available over and over again. He was terrified to learn that his conversation with Officer Welthouse had been recorded, fearing his co-workers and superiors thought he had lost his mind. What we heard was eventually released to Virginia Tilley of MUFON by the local police. I'm supposed to be the scientist, the skeptic, the explainer of aerial phenomena. That's my profession, Bushong said, yet found himself on record talking about UFOs. Bushong confided with friends and family that he feared being fired for this, and after months of ridicule by his co-workers, once walking into his office encountering a forest of paper plates dangling in the air, he relocated out of state, all the way to Atlanta, Georgia, away from his friends and family, to be able to continue his career and profession without ridicule. It's always easier to just stay quiet, which is why anyone speaking up about their experience with unexplained phenomena shows incredible courage without any reward. He would wait for 2 decades to speak freely about the events of March 8, 1994, upon retiring from the National Weather Service, when he connected with MUFON investigator Virginia Tilley to learn of the over 300 testimonies, 65 911 calls, all corroborating he was not insane and that the events of March 8, 1994 were in fact real. Tilley, through the gathered testimonies, could track the object's trajectory as they traveled from the upper West Michigan shoreline, heading south-southwest towards Chicago, spanning 200 miles of Michigan coastline all the way down to the Indiana state line. Per Bushong's radar tracking system, occasionally they would hover inland and return, just like the eyewitnesses described. They would hover silently, stationary for a good amount of time over the middle of Lake Michigan at 6,000 feet, as confirmed by eyewitnesses and by Bushong's radar. This is where the most bizarre and yet also most understandable sighting occurred. It is what I believe to be the main reason they were there in the first place. Let me explain. Lake Michigan is a formidable lake. Along with Lake Erie and Lake Superior, it's the largest body of freshwater on the planet by mileage. The volume record is still held by Lake Baikal in Russia, as we have covered in a previous episode, including alien divers. It's another giant body of freshwater, one of the largest such reserves on the planet, in addition to Lake Michigan. And this matters because of what Jacques Buchon observed on radar and was corroborated by a young couple who were camping on the shores of Lake Michigan that night near Benton Harbor. What they witnessed scared the daylight out of them. The wife woke up shortly after midnight, hearing massive sounds of water. As they peeked outside their tent, they got so scared they packed their gear and left immediately. They later lent their account to the body of evidence gathered by MUFON. This corroborative account alone, to me, qualifies the importance of the work of MUFON and its countless volunteers who tirelessly collect eyewitness testimony and other evidence data in a trained and systematic way to be shared, studied, compared, analyzed, and ultimately used in support of conclusions. And that's exactly where I want to take this conversation today. Because what the young people saw that night differs from anyone else's account. They saw lights hovering stationary over the lake at a distance of 10 to 15 miles, they estimated, and an altitude anywhere between 5 and 10,000 feet. But it wasn't just hovering. What they saw, illuminated as from within or from behind, was a giant waterfall in reverse, where water ran upwards towards a craft, hovering at 6,000 feet, running steadily upwards as it continued to be illuminated. It must have been as magnificent as it was terrifying, unfamiliar, unexplained, and for them a reason to leave and try to forget the unforgettable. It would be 20 years later, when compared to Jacques Buchon's data, that the corroborative relationship was realized. He had recorded multiple objects, dozens of them, in the words of Jacques Buchon, hovering stationary about 20 miles offshore at 6,000 feet, in the exact spot the young couple had stated they saw what they saw. From there, they kept shooting up to 55,000 feet, according to Buchon, in seconds, a feat not possible by any human instrument, and then coming back down again just as fast, by the dozens, he said, and then repeat the feat over and over again. There's a lot to unpack here. It means this eyewitness account was also recorded by technological equipment, a radar device, at that exact spot, at that exact time. And what about the inverse waterfall, a rare eyewitness account the world over? Using the logic of Occam's razor, that the simplest explanation tends to be the right one, what they were doing was collecting freshwater out of the lake in front of eyewitnesses as it happened. This was a massive water extraction operation involving dozens of craft moving rapidly up above the atmosphere and down again to get more water from the extracting craft/machine hovering at 6,000 feet. The inverse waterfall the young couple witnessed was the center of the extraction operation, a giant water column being sucked up from the lake and through the craft into the transport UFOs that kept shooting up and down again in seconds, delivering the water to whoever received it above the stratosphere. The inverse waterfall was 3 times taller than the tallest waterfall on Earth, Angels Falls in Venezuela, which are 2,500 feet or 800 meter high. Here, we're talking 6,000 feet or almost 1.8 kilometers in height. Yes, it must have been terrifying, but to dampen our primal fear for those of us already accepting the reality of UFOs and alien presence on Earth, for sustenance, of course the Ebens need fresh water. It must have been a magnificent sight to see. You can watch and listen to this and other podcasts on Project Bluebook, where we explore all things unidentified. Each day, let's practice compassion and kindness. And please subscribe. I am Thor, and thanks for tuning in. See you next time.